So hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm currently in a town called Frome in Somerset to basically start trying out the Fuji X-E1. What I'm going to be doing at the same time is obviously comparing this Fujifilm camera with the Fujifilm X100 that I've been using for quite a few months now. So I hope you enjoyed that little run through. Not my finest compositions by any stretch of the mind, but I wanted to kind of take a lot of different kind of subjects to give me a broad kind of range of different compositions in which I can compare the outputs from both cameras to help me decide which one basically to keep, really, if any of them. All the images were straight out of the camera JPEGs. So no editing whatsoever on any of those images that you've just seen. Yeah, so as I mentioned at the start of the video as well, I had real trouble trying to match the field of view of the X100 with the X-E1 because the lens that I've got for this camera, which is just a cheap kit lens, which is a 15 to 45 zoom lens, you can zoom it obviously as a different lens, but it doesn't tell you in the camera whatsoever what actual focal length you're shooting at. The only way you can find that information out is after you've taken the image on the file's EXIF data. So when I received and started using the X-E1 in this kind of bout, I really wanted the X100 to win in the image quality stakes as well, because as I mentioned in the previous video that I did with this camera, I'll put the link up below, is that I just absolutely love the kind of the way that this camera feels in your hand to kind of use out in the field. So I was kind of sold by that point on the actual form factor, and also coupled with the excellent viewfinder, which is a lot bigger than the one on the X-E1, and the option to use this optical viewfinder, and then as well the amazing leaf shutter, which is really great for street photography. It's so quiet when you're out shooting with this camera. So yeah, I really wanted this one to win in the image quality stakes. However, I think you'll agree, in the majority of cases, unfortunately, the images from the X-E1 were superior to those from the X100. They had a real kind of pop to them compared to those from the X100, which I was really pleased with before I actually started using the X-E1. So don't get me wrong, I took some great images with the X100, and I'll put some of those up now. And bear in mind though, these are kind of my final edited images from the X100, which have gone into my kind of Lightroom catalogue. But I also took some really good ones with the X-E1 as well, and I put them up as well. But in all honesty, I probably didn't try as hard with the X-E1 camera, or even use it as much as I really wanted it to lose. So it was a little bit frustrating that it kind of proved to be pretty good in terms of its out of camera JPEGs. So if I could have bought an X100 with the same sensor processor combination as the X-E1 and its bigger brother the X Pro one, then I probably would have bought it like a shot. But as it is, you can't, because the X-E1 and the X Pro one have the original X-Trans sensor, which is what is supposed to be special about the images with that first kind of iteration of the X-Trans sensor, whereas the original X100, which we've got here, has a Bayer sensor, and then all the other cameras in the series started off at X-Trans 2, X-Trans 3 and so on. So it's just not going to be possible. So I did think for a time whether I should just get the F or the V variant of the X100, because like I said, I do love using this kind of form factor rangefinder kind of camera. But that kind of goes against my current thinking in terms of digital cameras, in that newer cameras with newer sensors don't necessarily translate into better looking images. So before completely giving up on the X100, I thought I'd then try to see whether I can get the raw files looking better than the images that come out of the X-E1, and then likewise see what the raw files of the X-E1 look like, and just see whether again I can get comparable results with the X100. My conclusions of trying a few different software programs out is that certainly for the X100, the free version of Capture One that you can get if you own any Fuji camera is pretty good at taking the raw files and providing you with a kind of a TIFF file which you can then edit in Lightroom. And I actually find that those files actually look better than the original JPEGs, which is kind of expected, but it also kind of changes the character, and I think for the better, certainly for the X100 images. I find Lightroom, my version of Lightroom anyway, which is ancient now, 5.7, still does a pretty good job with the X100 raw files, but just not quite as good as Capture One Express, and I'll show you some examples of that in a minute. Moving on to the X-E1's raw files, and I found that no matter what software I try, none of them do a particularly good job, and in fact that the out of camera JPEG for the majority of time looks the best. The kind of the exports from Capture One, for instance, again I'll show you some examples in a minute, but they almost kind of flatten the image. It loses its kind of pop and any kind of depth from the image, and it just, yeah, so and Lightroom is just rubbish with X-Trans files anyway. And I also tried a demo version of Iridian X Transformer, which is supposed to be really good for X-Trans files specifically, and the good thing with that software is you can just it becomes kind of like a plug-in to Lightroom, so you can continue importing your files into Lightroom and then just use the plugin then to kind of convert it into a more workable kind of file for Lightroom. And again, I'll show you some examples of that. So yeah, so let's have a look at the examples. Right, so this is an image that I captured in Frome, and this is the straight out of camera JPEG from the X100, and then the next file along is just a straight kind of export from Capture One. So you can see it's added a lot more kind of character to the image. It's almost kind of like lifted the shadows a little bit, just make it pop a little bit more. So then again on this image, this is quite a flat image from the X100, this kind of building front in Frome. And then with the export from Capture One, it kind of does help make it come alive a little bit more. So that's the original JPEG, and then that's the Capture One export. And then on this image that I captured in London on a street corner, so this is the out of camera JPEG, and then again this is the straight export from Capture One, and you can really see here that it's really improved the kind of the tonality of the image right through all the colors, because it was kind of moving towards kind of sunset at this sort of time, and it's just kind of really lifted the image. So that's the original JPEG, and this is the Capture One export. And I think out of all those three files, this is the one where you can see how good a job Capture One does on these kind of X100 files. Right, so that's the ones from the X100. So now we'll go and have a look at the difficulties that I found when I was processing the X-E1 files. Right, so this is probably a really good example to use here. So this is the image straight out of camera from the X-E1. The next file is the Capture One export. So you can see it's kind of flattened it right down, like certainly on the brickwork on the left hand side. So this is the original JPEG. There's a lot more kind of tonality in the different kind of shades of the brick, and then you go over to the Capture One and it kind of completely takes all that out, and it just looks completely flat and uninspiring. And this is the Iridient X Transformer as attempt at the same raw file, and again it doesn't really do that much of a better job. I think actually Capture One does a better job here than the Iridient X Transformer. And then the final one, I did one from Lightroom as well, just for a bit of fun, and you can see it's probably the worst out of the lot in terms of the output. Although saying that though, you do get a little bit more kind of tonality in the brickwork, but it really does just kind of, it makes the image look horrible. Whereas if I go back to the original JPEG, there's something, it's just got a lot more kind of character, you know, in terms of the colors and the tonality. And then just quickly, this was another image I captured at home, so not on these two trips. So this again was the out of camera JPEG, and look what the export from Capture One did to this scene. It completely changed the kind of the look of the image. The leaves are kind of, again, they're quite flat compared to the original image, and it just loses that kind of that zing, you know, the kind of the pop that the X-E1 straight out of camera JPEGs are able to kind of produce from the scene. So as a last ditch attempt, I then wondered whether the Capture One exports from the X100 would be better, or at the very least equal, to those straight out of camera JPEGs from the X-E1. So I'll show some examples again, and you'll see that sadly, in most cases, the X-E1 JPEG, amazingly, is still better than the raw file from the X100 exported from Capture One. So again, we'll go back to the decaying house here again from Frome. And so this is the straight out camera image from the X-E1, and we'll switch to the X100's Capture One export. So you can see here it kind of is a bit flat compared to the kind of I guess it looks more three-dimensional, is what I'm saying, in the X-E1's case. You know, you can kind of see the depth of where the kind of the rendering is chipped away from the wall, and the way that the kind of the window frame is kind of jutting out a little bit from the wall, whereas the X100, it all kind of looks a little bit more two-dimensional. And again, I think it's a case in point where the tonality and the colours on the X-E1 are just a lot better and more natural than those from the X100. So moving on to another example quickly. Right, so this is the one of Greenwich University out in London. So again, this is the X-E1 image, and then this is the export of the X100's RAW file. So it's probably easier to see in this case, you know, the kind of the stark differences. The X-E1 does a much better job. And then finally, back to Frome again. So here's the out of camera image from the X-E1, and then the next image you'll see will be the X100's Capture One export. So again, you can kind of see straight away really that it just lacks that kind of three-dimensionality, you know, to the ironwork. You know, the ironwork sticking out on the side of the building, it just looks completely flat in this image, where it does look more, in my opinion, organic and three-dimensional in this image. And these were literally taken like seconds apart here, you know, so it's not like the lights changed or anything. It's just the X-E1 just produces a better image. So invariably, when I edited the files from the X-E1, I generally just used the JPEGs, because obviously I couldn't get the RAW files anywhere near the quality of the JPEGs, and that kind of almost harks back to when I used to use an Olympus Pen EPL2, a 12 megapixel crop sensor camera, which I invariably found it quite hard to match the JPEG kind of quality from that camera as well. So it's nice that I've managed to find another camera where I don't have to do that much editing on, just a few very minor tweaks and kind of leveling and cropping kind of changes in Lightroom to get the kind of the final image. Whereas compared to the files out of the X100, I've got to take them into Capture One, then I've got to export them, then bring them back into Lightroom, and then do quite more substantial edits, I would say, to get them up to the same quality. And even then, they still don't really match those the images that I managed to get from the X-E1. So when I started this video, I did not expect to get anything like that kind of quality out of this kind of 9-year-old Fujifilm camera, and with a cheap kit lens on the camera to boot. That is horrible to use in operation, because like I said, you don't really know what focal length you've kind of selected until you kind of get back and look at the file on the computer. But saying that, it does, like moving forward, when I'm not trying to match the kind of the focal length of the X100, I'll obviously just try and use the zoom to kind of hone in on the kind of the composition that I want to achieve in an image, so it won't be that much of a concern moving forward. And I do have an adapter for the X-E1, which has allowed me to put my kind of my old Olympus OM legacy lenses on as well, which I've had quite a lot of success with using. So on the back of this kind of video, I have decided to sell the X100, which is annoying, because I really did like using this camera, but I was almost a little bit biased in this video because I was using it a lot more. Whereas since I've got back and I've seen that the quality that this camera produces, I have tried to kind of embrace this camera a lot more and try and use it. And then that will kind of lead me in nicely to my next video, where I'll go through, like I did with the X100, I'll go through some of my thoughts of actually using the X-E1. Yeah, so I think that's about that for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Please put any comments you have on any of the images that I've included in this video, whether you agree with my kind of conclusions, you know, that the X-E1 did, I think, win this kind of experiment, or any other comments or questions you have on any of the other videos that I've produced so far on this channel. So, thanks for watching. Bye for now.